Have you ever really thought about a modern microchip? I mean, it just looks like this unfathomable maze of wires and microscopic components. But in this explainer, we're going to demystify all of that immense complexity. We're going to reveal how literally everything inside those incredibly powerful chips boils down to just two fundamental types of circuits, working together in absolutely perfect harmony.
It really all starts with this one wild question. How does a lifeless, static piece of rock, basically silicone, actually learn to calculate and remember? Well, it helps to think of a computer processor kind of like a brain, but a brain with two very distinct hemispheres. You've got one half that's dedicated to pure in-the-moment reactions, and another half dedicated strictly to memory and keeping time.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll cover the foundation of electronics, then move into combinational logic for pure computation, followed by sequential logic to add memory. After that, we'll tackle timing and synchronization, look at real-world VLSI applications, and finally, how we physically build all of this with CMOS transistors.
Okay, Section 1, the foundation of electronics. We are introducing the two halves.
Think about the sheer scale of the hardware powering our world right now. We're talking about microchips executing billions upon billions of microscopic operations every single second. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Yet, when you strip away all those layers of complexity, the entire foundation rests on just two abilities: calculating numbers instantly and remembering those results for later.
Moving right along to Section 2, combinational logic, or pure computation.
So what is combinational logic? By definition, it's a circuit where the output depends solely on its current inputs. There are absolutely no feedback paths. Actually, scratch that. A better way to say it is that it has zero memory. Think of it like a standard desktop calculator. You punch in 2 plus 2, and it instinctively reacts to give you 4 based purely on the buttons you just pressed. But the second you hit clear, total amnesia. It has no idea what you just calculated.
Within this hemisphere of the brain, we've got a few common circuits doing the heavy lifting. We have adders and subtractors handling the math, multiplexers routing the data, decoders converting binary inputs, and comparators doing, well, comparisons. Now, because these don't have memory elements, they don't have to wait around for a clock beat to act. Their main timing limit is just propagation delay, literally the physical time it takes for an electrical signal to push its way through the logic gates.
And this isn't just theoretical textbook stuff, right?
Adders form the absolute core of the arithmetic logic units, the ALUs, inside every Intel and AMD processor out there.
Meanwhile, those decoders, they're working overtime, handling memory address decoding in the DRAM chips of whatever device you're using right now.
Which brings us to a major problem, and Section 3, sequential logic, adding memory.
Because think about it, what good is a blazing fast calculation if the computer instantly forgets the answer the moment the inputs change? To solve that, we introduce our second hemisphere, sequential logic. These are circuits that actually retain an internal state. The output depends not just on the inputs coming in right now, but on the present state of the circuit itself. It's kind of like a mechanical combination lock or a tally counter. The lock remembers the numbers you've already spun, right? It relies on its past to determine its future. To pull this off, sequential logic relies on specific memory elements. You have latches, which are level sensitive, and then you have flip-flops, which are edge triggered and are basically the absolute standard for modern ASIC and FPGA design. When you group a bunch of those flip-flops together, you get registers, which form the crucial memory banks inside CPUs. Throw in counters, and now you can handle timers and sequences.
The real magic trick here is the physical feedback loop. In these circuits, the output is literally wired back around to become an input. That physical loop is exactly what traps electrical signal, essentially creating a memory state. It allows the circuit to hold on to a bit of data tightly until it's specifically told to change. But how does the circuit know when to change? That brings us to Section 4, timing and synchronization.
If combinational logic is reacting as fast as possible and sequential logic is holding on to data, we absolutely need a strict heartbeat to keep them synchronized. Otherwise, it's just chaotic overlap. We call that heartbeat the clock. For a flip-flop to reliably capture data, it has to follow a super strict sequence. First, the data input arrives. Then comes the setup time. The signal must sit completely stable before the clock edge hits. Third, the clock edge triggers the capture. Finally, the hold time, where the data stays stable for just a fraction of a moment longer. If you violate that setup or hold time, the system falls into a critical failure mode known as metastability, where it literally can't decide if it's a 0 or a 1. It's a total disaster for the chip. If you were to hook this up to an oscilloscope in a lab, you'd see how incredibly tight these margins are. You have this sharp, split-second rising peak of the clock edge. The signal has to be perfectly flat and stable on either side of that peak to be captured safely. In modern high-speed chip design, engineers are constantly obsessing over these tiny fractions of a nanosecond.
So putting both halves head-to-head really cements how they work together. Combinational logic, no memory, no clock, no feedback. It's less complex and generally faster because it just pushes signals through. Sequential logic absolutely needs memory, a clock, and feedback loops. It's way more complex, and its speed is strictly bottlenecked by the clock frequency, but it's what lets us actually build state machines and registers. There's a design insight that perfectly summarizes this whole dynamic. Sequential circuits add state and timing. Combinational circuits add computation. That is the ultimate takeaway for how processors are orchestrated. You use the combinational side to do the heavy lifting of the math, and the sequential side to keep everyone in order and remember the results.
Okay, Section 5, Real-World VLSI Applications. Let's scale this up. How do we turn these basic logic gates into the very large-scale integration devices that run our lives? While in processor design, an Intel Core uses those combinational ALUs for arithmetic, while the sequential control unit manages the timing through the pipeline. In memory design, we use combinational decoders right alongside sequential register files. This exact same division of labor applies whether you're working with reconfigurable FPGAs or hardwired custom ASICs like the processors in smartphones. When you scale this theory up into massive, complex microchips, you see this pairing everywhere. Companies like Xilinx use combinational lookup tables physically paired with flip-flops in basically every logic block. And for custom ASICs, like a Google TPU used for AI, engineers hardwired these exact logic blocks together permanently to squeeze out the absolute maximum performance and power efficiency possible.
Finally, Section 6, Building with CMOS Transistors.
We've talked a lot about the logic itself, but how do we physically print these gates onto a slice of silicon? The answer is CMOS technology. It's a brilliant setup that pairs a PMOS pull-up network with an NMOS pull-down network. Whether you are building a basic inverter, a complex NAND gate, or an edge-triggered flip-flop, CMOS lets you implement this logic with near-zero static power consumption. The electricity basically only flows when the state actually flips. It's incredibly efficient. But this creates massive physical layout challenges. Because we have millions of these delicate, sequential flip-flops spread all over the chip, engineers have to use something called clock tree synthesis. They carefully route the physical clock signal wires so that the pulse arrives at every single flip-flop at the exact same nanosecond, to avoid what we call clock skew. It's like trying to make millions of synchronized swimmers move perfectly on beat. We have journeyed all the way from the abstract math of combinational computation and sequential memory, right down to the physical silicon of CMOS transistors. But as we keep shrinking these parts down, pushing the absolute limits of physics, I want to leave you with this. How will we build the brains of computers when these logic gates shrink down to the size of a single atom? It's going to be a massive challenge for the next generation. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the digital world works.